Hey, Bright Lights, it's Angela, and welcome to Architecting. I am really excited today to welcome John Tyreman, who is the founder of Red Cedar Marketing and the co-host and producer of the Breaking Biz podcast. Hey, John, how are you?
Hi, Angela. It's great to be speaking with you again. We've had a few conversations now.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to bring you on because we don't talk a whole lot about marketing, even though we talk a lot about advocacy in the world of architecting. And I think a lot of your expertise is something that can really give some rocket fuel to some of the work that people want to do to really advance issues that they're passionate about and grow their careers.
Hmm.
So I wanted to start just by asking you how you got into doing what you're doing, because it's not what most people think about when they think about marketing.
Yeah, when you think about marketing, typically people think about like Super Bowl commercials, right? And all the advertising campaigns that they see on TV and in the real world. But yeah, I actually started out going to school for systems engineering and quickly kind of changed tune a little bit to marketing because I was in, and this kind of dovetails into what I do today with the whole podcasting production business that I have is um, I was in bands all through high school. And so promoting live events and things like that, that was just something that lit me up. And so I went into marketing, and then right out of school, I got a job at an agency called Hinge Marketing in Reston, Virginia. So right outside of Washington D.C. And I started out doing market research. So I would kind of look at like survey results, look at interviews, conduct interviews eventually, and that kind of fed into the content strategy at Hinge of producing and publishing original research. So that's kind of how I got into this space.
Cool. And then you decided to go out on your own. What made you decide to make that leap and start a podcast?
Yeah, so all those years producing music and putting on live shows, I was very familiar with like audio recording platforms, right? So excuse me. So one day, I had a 90-minute commute to the office. And so I listened to a ton of podcasts on the way in, and I ran through all my sports content, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to put a business podcast on and just kind of see if I can get some new ideas. And so that worked, and I got some really good ideas, and I thought, hey, there's something to this podcasting thing. So, my a mentor of mine, Kelly Waffle, he and I launched a podcast called The Visible Expert at Hinge, and we interviewed different thought leaders in marketing and architecture and engineering and consulting, and that was really fun doing it with him. And we had a blast putting on that podcast, and we were able to have conversations with people we wouldn't normally be able to have conversations with, and that was really cool. And then sometime after that, I actually left Hinge and went to a digital marketing agency in DC called Silverback Strategies, where I launched another podcast called Digital Marketing Troop. And I interviewed internal subject matter experts. I interviewed external subject matter experts about like the technical aspects of marketing, SEO, paid media, um, analytics, kind of how creative can be measured and optimized. And then I was actually laid off in October of 22. And there I was kind of hitting the job market a little bit, getting ghosted by recruiters. And that's like an ugly part of getting laid off. Um, but I ended up getting a referral from a friend who was like, hey, this consulting firm needs some marketing help. Do you want to do this on the side part time while you're looking for a job? So that was kind of what led me into like a fractional career in marketing. And then just within the last 9 months or so, I've narrowed my focus to podcast marketing for experts and professional services firms. So that's kind of the trajectory that I'm on.
Interesting. So could you explain what fractional in marketing really means to people?
Yeah, sure. So it's essentially you're working with a part-time resource with the expertise. that you could get. So, for example, a professional services firm could hire a full-time marketing director, right? Which would likely command somewhere near a six-figure salary, right? Um, but or you could work with a marketing director in a fractional capacity, a part-time capacity. Maybe it's a limited engagement in terms of hours per month, or maybe it's a limited engagement in terms of like scoped project deliverables each month. But you would be working with them for the cost of an entry level employee. So you're getting senior level expertise for a much lower cost, and that's not even to mention benefits and taxes and things like that. So working with a fractional consultant is, and this is not just marketing, but for finance, for operations, for HR. Working with fractional employees, 1099 employees, is one way for firms to grow, especially small firms. I think it's a great solution for small professional service firms.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get a little too into the DIY world and maybe make more
Yeah,
work for ourselves than we need to.
it's so true.
But especially around marketing, I think most people can understand why they need an accountant, at least part-time, but really understanding why they can't do the marketing 100% on their own is not always clear. So, how do you help people who only can work with you in that fractional capacity to really up their game in terms of marketing?
Yeah, well, look, for professional services firms and for architects, you're in the business of expertise, right? And the number one rule in architecture is you got to win the work first, because without the client, there is no architecture. And so that's why business development is so important in professional services firms, for these technical experts to learn how to market their firms, how to sell, essentially. I know, sales is deemed a bad word, but it's essential for a growing business. And so you're in the business of expertise, which means that your thought leadership, your perspective, the way that you approach certain situations for your client, right? Those are the things that buyers look for when they're evaluating different service providers. So the extent to which that you can touch on what makes you different, what makes you unique, why buyers should choose you over another firm, that's so critical, because the buying process, the sales cycles in professional services are so long. So if a buyer is introduced to your firm, maybe it's not the right time, right? Maybe they don't have a project at the ready, but it's important to maintain that relationship, and it's important to stay connected to that prospective buyer for months, years even, before they're ready to buy. And that's why marketing is so important.
Yeah, and I think what kind of emerges as you say this is you become known for something.
Yeah.
And maybe it's advocacy around a particular issue, like we stand for salute Genesis in my case. But as a firm, it might be sustainable design, it might be the user experience, it might be, computational design and how we can leverage technology or construction strategies, whatever it is, taking a stand around that issue makes you known for it. So then when people need that particular thing, they go, oh, wait, I remember. I always see information about this firm in this area. And now they're more likely to invite you to submit a proposal or something like that.
The mere exposure effect is what that's called in psychology, buyer psychology. Is the more that you're exposed to a brand, to a person, to an individual who is, like you say, is known for that one thing, you start to not only associate them to that thing, but just because you're exposed to them over and over again, you start to build a level of familiarity and trust with them.
Yeah, interesting, because you're seeing it when they're not selling something to you. So now when they talk about it, when they're selling something to you, it has more credibility.
And more credibility. It's familiar to you. So your guard is down. You're more open to listening, to collaborating with that service provider, and developing a solution that might work for you, the buyer.
Yeah, and as we do this though, a lot of times people can fall into the pitfall of, well, I do 10 different things. How
Yeah.
can you help people really find the one or two that they should focus on?
So I'll go back to my time at Hinge researching professional services firms. So I was part of a team that analyzed both buyers of professional services and the employees within professional services firms, and understanding each of their unique perspectives on why buyers win or why buyers choose the firm, why we win the work. What were some of the selection criteria? What tipped the scale in favor of this firm over another one? And the one common theme that kept coming up in the research that I was doing, analyzing thousands of different respondents, was this notion of industry specialization or specialization in some sort of specific service offering for a specific audience. And that was one of the keys to the firms that grew at a 20% compound annual growth rate versus firms that were growing at a sub 10% compound annual growth rate. So that was one of the biggest differences between those two growth trajectories. So that led me to looking at, okay, well, what are these firms doing? Like, how does that look in practice, right? So what does specialization really mean? And then you go to these firm websites and they have, full webinar series dedicated to a specific industry, like an accounting firm dedicated to the manufacturing industry, right? Or a design planning firm specifically who works on music halls and theaters and buildings that need acoustics incorporated into the design of the building, right? And so you see these firms that are growing at a faster rate, and that's one of the big reasons why.
Yeah, they're having a really clear point of view. Now,
Yeah.
some people might be a little hesitant to put that stake in the ground and say, is that going to limit me? Or what if clients I'm already working with don't agree with that stance? Is that going to make me lose work? We're a very lack-based thinking kind of industry here. So, how can we do this in a way that feels right and that doesn't make it seem like we might lose people, but are going to gain people instead?
Yeah, it's one of those kind of situations that a lot of individual experts find themselves in as maybe they're starting their own practice and they're starting to grow, or firms that have grown through relationships and referrals and have kind of found themselves in a situation where they can take on multiple different kinds of work. I think the first step is understanding what is the kind of work that your firm does best, the services that are the most profitable, the services that attract the kinds of clients that you want to work with. And that's one of the most important things, is understanding who your best fit clients are. Um, are they easy to work with and why? And are they in a particular industry? Or maybe it's something intangible, right? And so maybe it's they're aligned with your values as a person or aligned with your mission as a business. And understanding who that core group of clients are is the first step. And then understanding what are the services that are best to serve that audience. And then once you find that out, you can align your perspective, your thought leadership, your opinions based around that. So for example, the my Mark Wainwright and I co-host a podcast called Breaking Biz Dev, and our whole point of view is that business development is broken in professional services, and we want to shine a light on that, right? Well, if people that are listening, if they don't think that their business development operation is broken, that's not who we want to listen to our podcast. And so yeah, we're taking a kind of a little bit of a stance on that, but it's attracting the kinds of listeners that we want to attract.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that when it's okay to lose people that may be providing you steady work, but not the work you really want to be doing, if it means you're going to gain more people who are enthusiastic and excited about what you do. And I think it also
Yeah,
can translate to recruitment and retention of your staff too, because this point of view
that's a great point.
starts to shape the culture of your firm.
Well, so yeah, are your employees happy doing the work, right? And if your employees aren't happy doing the work, then why would they stay at your firm, right? They're likely going to be looking for other opportunities that are more fulfilling. So if you can align your point of view with the employees you attract and the clients that you serve, then you have a sustainable growth model.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of that just because you can doesn't mean you should thinking.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, especially if you have started your own firm and you're a small business, you probably started out with the clients that you knew you could get. And this is
Hmm.
working, you're making money, maybe you're growing, but now's a good time to say, what do I really want to do? Where do I really want to position myself? And it might not be exactly where you are today.
There was an accounting firm that I worked with. Well, one of the early projects that I worked with when I was in an agency, and they were kind of boiling the ocean a little bit, right? They were working with many different kinds of small businesses, and what we found in talking to their customers was the best fit customers were restaurants, right? And so what we did is we rebranded the firm to focus on accounting for restaurants. And yeah, there was a little hesitation at first because it's like, okay, well, this is going to alienate, X% of our client base. Um, but and yeah, they had some short-term revenue kind of a downturn, but the growth that happened after that was astronomical, and it was because of that laser focused positioning. And yeah, they took some short-term hits, but for the sake of long-term growth. So that's just kind of one example of that.
Yeah, finding that right alignment is important. So how do you help people really get that sweet spot of where their thought leadership should be? And how do you measure the payoff of doing that? You said a little bit they might grow their business, but how do we know it's working as we're implementing a strategy?
Yeah. So obviously, you look at marketing and you want to look at what's the return on the marketing investment, right? So that's what business owners, that's what investors want to look at. In professional services, if you start a marketing campaign or if you change your strategy, you really need to be looking at about a 12 months worth of data before you really have an idea of whether or not that strategy is going to have an impact. Um, so I was uh, I was talking with Jeremy Clopton and Heath Alloway of the Upstream Leader podcast, and I asked them about their podcast and how it contributes to business development for their firm, um, the Upstream Academy, and they told me that they committed to 1 year of the podcast, so it's a bi-weekly, or twice monthly cadence, and so they committed to 24 episodes of their podcast. And they said that it was challenging within that first year, but they knew that it wouldn't have any impact if they quit after 6 months. And they said that they were very glad that they did stick to that because the podcast was a way to grow relationships, and grow their network of potential clients. And it's become a source of leads for their business. So you got to take a long-term approach to your marketing strategy and the channels you select and how you're positioned in the marketplace. Um, so that's kind of like that's why that's the typical kind of lens that I would look at that.
And in terms of like, we don't just want to do something because this is a lucrative area to get into, right? It has to feel authentic to who you are, what you care about, where your
Oh,
expertise
sure.
is. So, how can you help people discover that? Sometimes we don't know what we're good at. We need somebody to come in from outside and kind of read the tea leaves.
Yeah, so I think that there's really three ways that you can grow as an expert, and share your point of view and your thought leadership and develop a personality and develop a personal brand. There's really three skills I should say. There's writing, there's speaking, and then there's networking. Those are kind of like the three big skills and hallmarks of a well-known expert. Um, and to grow your personal brand and to grow the visibility of your subject matter expertise, you can write through a number of different channels, right? You can write on a blog. You can build a newsletter. You could write for a newsletter, right? Create a newsletter. Speaking, you can go out and um, pick up speaking gigs, right? You can do the speaking circuit. You could be a guest on podcasts like this one, right? You could launch your own podcast, like you have, Angela, like many others in professional services have. So those are a couple of different ways, and then growing your network is a matter of just being social on social media and connecting with other people, having meaningful conversations, just getting to know other folks in the profession, not with the intention to sell, not with the intention of um, trying to further your business, but just to grow your network. So I think those are three different ways to get started. Is kind of like looking at, okay, am I a good speaker? Okay, maybe not. Then am I a better writer? Okay, well, maybe not so, but am I a good networker? Oh yeah, I like to, talk with other people. So that's like the one of the first places where I would start is looking at, okay, what are those skills, understanding where your strengths are, and then understanding, okay, do I need to build skills in these other areas so that I could have more of a well-rounded personal brand around my expertise?
Yeah. And I think when you do that, I always tell people you can take your ego out of it because a lot of people will be like, well, who am I to talk about this or that? Other people are, and like, but even if you know 10% more than your audience, you're helping your audience.
Yeah, I like to think about it as like, what would I like to know 3 or 5 years ago, 3 to 5 years ago, right? And what have I learned in that amount of time? And if I can share my point of view about, solving those challenges, then that's going to help someone who's a few steps behind me, right? And that's part of one of the reasons why I host another show called Podcasting and Professional Services. Angela, you were a guest on that show. For folks that are listening to this, go check out that interview. We talk all about architecting and your journey there. Um, but part of why I host that show is because I want to interview folks that are a few steps ahead of me, right, on my own journey, so that I can take, you know, words of wisdom from them and apply them to myself. But in doing so, I'm also helping folks that are either kind of like peers of where I am in my own journey as an entrepreneur, as a podcaster, or maybe there's folks that are just starting out that want to hear from successful business podcasters. So that's one way to kind of like pass the torch or share your expertise, share your collective knowledge with folks that are interested in the same things as you.
Now, that's a great way to think about it. And, when you do that, you make it about the issues, not about yourself. And you don't
Yes.
have to go and say, I have all the answers. It can just be, let's talk about this issue. This is working for me. What's working for you? And it actually can create more engagement than you would think than just being the talking head with the 6 o'clock news, perfect expert information.
Yeah, totally.
So, what would you say to people who are listening to this and maybe they're vibing with it, but they're saying, but I don't have time. I'm too busy.
Oh, that's just code for it's not high enough of a priority on my list, right? So if you're really serious about growing a firm, growing a practice, and you want it to be a solo venture, right? You're a solopreneur and you just want it to be you, right? Well, the business is tied to you and your point of view and your subject matter expertise. Maybe you want to grow your firm and hire technical experts to join you. Then I think marketing is still worth your time because growth is a long process, right? Growing a business is a long-term engagement. So, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. And if you don't start doing something, building your personal brand in some area with some skill on some channel, then I think you're missing out on business that can come from all sorts of different places, right? You don't just have to respond to proposals all day long. New business from your best fit clients can come inbound from LinkedIn. They can come from a reply from your email newsletter. They could come from a podcast subscriber. It can come from an inbound search from SEO. There's so many different places where buyers of professional services firms, they're online. They're used to going to Amazon and searching, they're used to going on Google and searching. They're used to following their favorite sports teams on social media. Why do we think that marketing is so much different in professional services? I think that's one of the big questions to
Mhm.
ask of firm owners is, why do we think that it's so much different?
Yeah, and a lot of people will say, I don't really want to be an influencer. That's not my role or my job. So how can they get more comfortable sharing content?
Yeah, I think that the term influencer is so funny to me because everyone, every single person on this planet holds influence to some degree, right? And like I mentioned earlier, it's all about finding your tribe. It's all about finding your best fit clients, who they would be, what sort of uh, elements make up the your ideal client. And then once you have that understanding, speak to one person, right? If on social media, in a podcast, in a newsletter, it doesn't matter the channel or format. If you're on stage, you're likely in, an environment where you're speaking to your target audience directly. Um, but I think if you create a message, create a point of view that resonates with one specific individual that represents your ideal client, and then imagine yourself speaking to just that one person. And I think that's kind of a tool that at least I've used when sharing content on social media. There's also this notion of imposter syndrome. Have you come across this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where we don't think that, we are fit to share our perspective, or, why would anyone want to hear from me? Or am I'm not good enough to share this on social media or in whatever format. But it takes some confidence to get over that. And it takes some, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It takes some confidence to get over that, but I think imposter syndrome is something that I think we can bring awareness to and help people overcome.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase, when people say, "Who am I to do this? Who are you not to do this?"
Hmm.
And like a lot of times when I'm working with people, that's what I say. If you really care about this issue, like let's say you design schools and you really care about what is going to promote learning, what is going to be the best environment for teachers,
Hmm.
that's what you're supporting. It's not about you. It's about the issue
That's
that you
exactly right.
care so much about. And when you can reframe it that way, then it's not like, oh, I think I'm so special and I'm so important. It's instead, I care so much about this that I really want to share this in the hope that this helps advance the dialogue.
Yeah, and that energy and that enthusiasm is palpable Right, right. Whether you're writing about it, whether you're speaking, oh, especially if you're speaking about it, but even if you're writing about it, you can still convey that energy that you have and excitement that you have around something that you're very passionate about, and that comes through. And the opposite comes through too. If you're not passionate about something, or if you're reluctant to share, or if you're dragging your feet, or if you're doing the bare minimum, then that's not going to move the needle for you, for your clients, for who you're trying to help, for your employees. So that's why it's important, again, to have, like, to your point, Angela, to really be passionate about and kind of aligned around one's core mission.
Well, these have been amazing tips and insights. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience in this world of content marketing. So, if someone wants to work with you, how can they reach you and learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. Go to redcedarmarketing.com. You can follow along with one of, a few different podcasts that I host. I do have a newsletter. I'm active on LinkedIn and Twitter, now known as X, at John_Tyreman. So, yeah, connect with me on social media and say hi.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. And make sure that you reach out to John, share an insight, tag him. I know that our guests always appreciate knowing what resonated with you. So if something really hit you today, definitely share that insight and tag him and tag Architecting Podcast. So thanks again for being a guest today. And everyone, have a great week.
Thanks, Angela.